Hello and welcome to the short Vort on Parshas Lech Lecha. Today's Divrei Torah will be based on the works of Baruch Simon in Imrei Baruch. And between Revii and Shlishi, we have the story where Og Melech HaBashan comes. He's the Polit, the survivor from the battle of the kings, as well as a battle he survived on the Teva through the flood. And he comes to inform Avraham Avinu that his nephew Lot had been captured, and he wants him to save Lot. And he does this not because he really wants to help Lot, but because he would like Avram to be killed chas v'shalom in battle, and then he would be able, Og would be able to get Sarai on his own. And the question that we'll start with, before we get to this wonderful lesson that we learn out of this story, is why was Og called Og? So the explanation that is given is because when he came to Avraham Avinu, so he saw that he was Yoshe ba'osek b'mitzvos ugos, or b'matzos ugos. But it was Pesach time, and he saw that Avram was working on matzos, that to him they looked like they were just some type of cake of some sort. He didn't think they were anything special. Now, because Avram went and saved Lot because of Og's information, Og was rewarded with a long life. He actually had lived and survived in the Mabul. He was outside the Teva with his head sticking in, and that's how he was fed. He also lived until the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu was actually afraid to do battle with him because of the zechus of getting Lot saved, which was not done l'shem shemayim. It was done b'kavana to get Avram killed. Yet, because the end result is that there was this savings and this Kiddush Hashem, so he still was rewarded despite his improper thoughts. So from that we see this amazing lesson that a person, when you do a chesed, your reward is so many times greater than that. And if you do it with the proper machshavos, alachas kama v'kama, compared to someone who did it with having improper thoughts, he still gets rewarded for the good results that came out of it. So at the time of the Mabul, there's a question of why was Og outside the Mabul? Why was he outside the Teva? Sorry. Why wasn't he saved inside the Teva if he was going to be saved? And also, why was his body out, but his head was sticking in and fed and saved by Noah? So, and this is a question of Rav Zadel Epstein, a contemporary Rav, and we think that there is not always a direct connection between the punishment that is granted, but there is a very strong connection between the punishment and the actual misdeed that is done. When the world was destroyed in the flood in Parshas Noach, it was because it was malei chamas. It was totally and completely filled with chamas. There's damage, there's stealing, everything. It was devoid of chesed. There was no chesed left, and that's why land, which normally shouldn't be punished, was destroyed, because if there's no chesed, there's no point in having creation. So there was an exception that Og actually, because he had with him and his people, he had a certain bit of chesed that wasn't completely chamas, wasn't completely negated. Therefore, he was not killed. And I'm sorry. So because he was mostly not chesed, so that was why his body was outside. The guf wasn't good, but he had internally in his heart, he still had a certain amount of chesed, and therefore the head was survived. The pad that spoke later on to help Avram save Lot, so that was rewarded for the good part of him. The bad part had to stay out in the flood, but it still survived a miracle. And so Rav Meir Tzvi Bergman is also quoted by Rabbi Simon, and he says that regarding Pesach, matzah is matzah only when you do matzah's mitzvah. You do it l'shem mitzvah of making the matzah. If you don't have it with the proper intent, it is in fact just uga. It's just a cake or a cookie or a cracker. So when it came to Og, his problem was he saw Avram on Pesach time working on the matzos, but to him, he didn't realize the machshava that was there, and he himself, when he did this deed to tell Avram, he did the right action by telling him, go save him, but his machshavos was actually for the wrong motivations, so he didn't learn the lesson to have proper machshavos in order to make a mitzvah complete. Therefore, he was penalized. Instead of having not just a long life, but a really long life, and not being killed by Avraham Avinu's descendants, who he wanted to kill Avram, he ended up seeing the millions of Jews that left Egypt, and he was killed by them. But if he had had the proper machshava when he did the mitzvah, then he would have had an incredible reward. And therefore, when we do chesed, we have to do it with the proper kavanos, and make sure that we keep it devoid of improper thought. Thank you for listening, and if you want to do a chesed and share this vort and pass it on, that would be wonderful. So have a great Shabbos and a great week. Thank you for listening.